This video is in no way, shape, or form political or should be interpreted as such. It is purely educational and based on research. Any statements made are not endorsements.
Actual Occult Iceberg Tier 4. Now it starts to get interesting. Many entries in this tier are often greatly distorted by the mainstream or the public, like by the media, secret societies, and so on. Actual knowledge about most of them is hard to come by, and if it is super biased or leaves certain things out, or information is more about to paint it in a certain light as to discourage people from looking into them, as it is the case with the O9A later. However, beneath the surface lie interesting discoveries, which I will now present. Also, made the Discord server link is down below. Make sure to join, like, subscribe, watch today, and support me on buymeacoffee.com/Daimon. Music industry. This entry refers to the music industry incorporating quite occult practices. A recent example that could be proven to the public was with P. Diddy. What he did was in a sense to use humiliation rituals, which has its own entry in the next tier, coercing, forcing and seducing musicians who would sign under him or who would want to get famous to partake in certain rituals of surrender in a nature. In a sense, the music industry is doing what Freemasons do. But not just that. The next entry of the Memphis Rap Sigils also goes to show that they use other occult techniques as well. Even straight up magic in the music in order to be successful and get as many people as possible to listen to it. What the music industry does, for example, is the use of very distinct and certain chord progression. That is very pleasing and ensures that the songs are liked by as many as possible. Some do already pick up on this and complain how all music in the radio sounds the same, which is technically not far from the truth. They make use of universal patterns of excellence, a term I came up with that would best describe it. Think back to sacred geometry in Platonism from the last year. It is similar here, just with sounds. Also, the use of vocal incantations similar to evoking beings during a ritual. Like, have you ever wondered why certain musicians pronounce words so weird in the songs? Almost as if the purpose was to imitate a sound, not necessarily to say a word. Forget conspiracy nut jobs that tell you to listen to music backwards. They have no clue what they are talking about. Try to listen to successful songs and only focus on listening to the lyrics. Not as in to understand them, but as if the vocals are the entire music, or only listen to the bass, and so on. Memphis Rap Sigils. The Memphis Rap Sigils refer to an occult urban legend tied to supposedly cursed tapes from the 1990s Memphis rap scene. During this era, Memphis hip-hop became infamous for its raw, horrorcore style, including violent lyrics, lo-fi production, and a sinister, almost ritualistic energy that set it apart from mainstream rap. But there was something far darker lurking beneath the music. According to legend, certain underground rappers embedded sigils into their tracks, occult symbols designed to harness and channel energy. These sigils weren't just drawn or spoken, they were created through ritual acts, capturing the audio of violent events and embedding them within their music. By spreading these cursed tapes, they believed they could amplify their own success, charging the sigil with each new listener. What makes this theory even more compelling is the deep occult history of Memphis itself. The city has long been associated with hoodoo, as mentioned in Tier 1. Even beyond that, Memphis takes its name from the ancient Egyptian city, once home to the revered god Ptah, the god of creation, closely linked to the element of water. Some believe that the sigils were tied to rituals honoring Ptah, with eerie connections to real-life murders in West Memphis. Adding a new twist to this legend is the modern resurgence of Memphis rap sound. Over the past few years, a new genre known as drift funk, popularized in Russia, has revived the distorted samples of classic Memphis underground rap. Some of these songs have gained hundreds of millions of views here on YouTube. Could it be that these sigils, still potent and brimming with magic, are being unknowingly or knowingly spread again? Om or Om refers to the holy syllable of the Vedas. Om is the way to address gods in mantra. By saying it, your voice vibrates on the core frequency of the universe. In Hindu rituals, as well as actual yoga, you often start by chanting Om for a few minutes to get in tuned. A similar practice that is used in other rituals as well, and even by people trying to do astral projection or remote viewing. It is a way to free your thoughts and to literally vibrate yourself to a certain frequency. When pronounced correctly, Om consists of 3 distinct syllabic vibrations. Represents creation, Brahma, the awakened state and physical reality. O represents preservation, Vishnu, the dream state and the astral world. Represents dissolution, Shiva, deep sleep and transcendence. The silent gap afterward represents Turiya, or pure consciousness beyond duality. Many traditions mirror this concept. Amen in Christianity, Tibetan Buddhist chants and Norse Guldur magic. Sound creates reality. In Hermeticism and Chaos magic, vibration is the key to shifting consciousness and manifesting intent. Whether seen as a spiritual tool or vibrational technology, Om is a gateway to cosmic alignment. Servitors. Servitors are thought forms created by individuals to assist with a specific task or a goal. Unlike spirits or external entities, a servitor is a construct of the Creator's will, existing solely to fulfill its intended purpose. For example, one might create a servitor to aid in gaining fame and success, like on YouTube, enhancing creativity or maintaining discipline. These entities are relatively easy to create compared to egregores, which are and act more global and wider. The key difference is that servitors remain personal, interacting only with their creator, while egregores influence larger groups or societies, but more about them later. Creating a servitor is similar to crafting a sigil, relying on intent and symbolism. The process begins by defining its purpose, what task will it perform, and then, through visualization, meditation and ritual, the servitor is brought to life, breathed into life. Writing out its purpose shapes its form. And through sustained focus, the servitor is imagined as dutifully and cheerfully fulfilling its role within set boundaries. Control is crucial. A servitor must not develop a will of its own, or it may evolve unpredictably. Once its purpose is successfully fulfilled, it must be deconstructed, essentially destroyed, to prevent it from lingering or transforming into an egregore or an local deity. This is done by consciously withdrawing the energy that sustains it and dissolving its form back to where it came from. Egregore. An egregore is a thought form, a being outside the material plane and on the astral plane, or inside the collective minds of people. It is birthed from many different sources and can have many intentions as well. They often arise from the collective unconscious, or are deliberately created to fulfill a task. Historically, egregores have been understood as neutral or even positive. However, in recent years they have become more and more negative and even parasitic in nature. They can often be described as a hideous being that induces certain negative, strong impressions and thought patterns in humans. A good way to understand them: think of the flavor that accompanies a dish. Now imagine an egregore as an overlay, altering the original flavor of this dish like a spice blend. And instead of the natural fatty and salty taste of a fish, for example, you taste the fish as spongy and sugary. And with an egregore, this is happening with one's own thoughts and perceptions. It shifts the focus away from authentic experiences and emotions and imposes its own influence, often completely overwhelming and distorting reality. People who are further in the journey naturally learn the ability to detect the presence of an egregore or if one has been attached to something. From my personal experience, I can describe them as something that wants to take over the part of emotional thinking for you. It gives a sensation of automatic and streamlined emotional thought that does not align with your usual thought processes. It's like being an autopilot. It conveniently gives you an emotion you should feel about this or that, and ideally you don't even think about why you feel this way. Notable egregores are, for example, the one that causes masturbation in young men, gooning, which makes men seek out ever more depraved stuff and ever more unhinged pornography to fill this insatiable hunger of the Egregore, turning them weak and socially awkward, giving them weird thoughts and open up the floodgates for other beings or powers that might root themselves into them, penetrating the walls, so to say. As we have seen with the Red Pill, Incel and MGTOW movement, destroying virility in men. Another common one, this time for young women, comes in the form of depression. Places like Tumblr, for example, that romanticize depression and other mental problems, and its effects are breeding grounds for egregores. I'm pretty sure that if you have ever seen a screenshot of a Tumblr conversation floating around, you notice the oddness it transmits. A special kind of oddness. It practically oozes and pulsates out of it. On Tumblr, suddenly depression isn't seen as something you want to overcome and defeat, rather it is seen as a comfort zone that you would not want to let go, and that is just something that makes you fit into this group, destroying fertility in women. In short, an egregore often works as a trigger that creates feedback loops in the mind, feeding off emotions and reinforcing certain thought patterns. Recognizing and dispelling their influence is a key step on the path to spiritual liberation. The Pagan Order of Nine Angles, aka O9A, yes, they are called Order of Nine Angles, not Nine Angels. Now, I know. With this group, it is interesting, because if you only look on the surface, it seems to rather be an extremist group, a neo-Nazi satanic group even. Like how horror movies would portray them, with blood, gore, dark arts and everything. However, I noticed something, and instead of letting their surface level claims deter me, I decided to dig deeper and see what they are about. And I found more than I thought I would. The O9A has been the subject of significant controversy, with accusations linking them to extremism and various crimes. However, after a closer look and some digging, it seems that this comes from purposeful misinformation and even appropriation by external groups. It seems that a criminal group has taken on the O9A name, using it as a cover for illegal activities. Through my research, I've uncovered information that details how this usurpation occurred and how the original O9A became the victim of a campaign that resulted in the name being misused by a criminal group. Many of the activities and associations attributed to the O9A are actually the actions of this criminal group. This raises the question, why? Well, without turning this into a conspiracy iceberg, it seems because the actual order has that primordial knowledge through tradition and connection to certain powers, which in turn makes certain actors wish to eradicate them. The original O9A follows a tradition that has long laid barren, and this is likely an attempt to prevent others from actually looking into them and their teachings, or perhaps some infighting in the group occurred and this led to a split. In any case, the actual and true O9A are something entirely different. The Order of Nine Angles is esoterically understood a pagan occult tradition, blending indigenous ancient English elements together, like the tradition of sorcery that is called Runvitha, and ancient Celtic paganism, as well as aspects of Greco-Roman Hermeticism. They follow their so-called sevenfold path, a path of spiritual evolution and transformation within the left hand or that path. If anything, the original O9A is more like a spiritual thought movement, similar as the Rosicrucians from the previous tier are, since they're not an actual organization, more a tradition. The aim of the original O9A is to secure the ancient primordial heritage of Albion. This is pre-Christian Britain, and to stand up against the false religion, altered by fantasy, that is Christianity, which sought to destroy this heritage of Britain and still tries to. If the story of the actual O9A and how they got usurped interests you, and I found out a lot about them, I would gladly make a dedicated video about them and present what I have. Sufism. Sufism refers to the esoteric and occult chapter in Islam. Unlike Christianity, Islam wasn't strictly opposed to pagan and pre-Islamic spiritual traditions, they integrated them, as originally Islam did not give directions on esoteric living, and as long as it could be reconciled with the god, it was seen as an expression of the faith. Notable Sufis were René Guénon, Julius Evola, and Al-Ghazali, one of Islam's greatest spiritual thinkers, who was important in reconciling the mystical and intellectual aspects of Sufism into Islam in the Middle Ages. Sufism is an initiatic tradition with its own masters, customs, secret symbols and gestures and the like, similar as Freemasonry was before this became degenerated. Also, it was Sufism that preserved Atlantean teachings from Egypt and Sumer, like alchemy, Hermeticism, astrology, and philosophy. Another example of the relationship to Hermeticism and the royal art can be found in the expression jihad, which means holy war. Now, in Islam, there are two holy wars. The lesser holy war, which is the external war with others, but there's also the greater holy war, which is the inner war with yourself, that you must fight with yourself, exactly as it is in alchemy, where you also have to fight yourself. This mirrors the process in alchemy, where one must undergo an inner struggle to achieve transformation. Sufism teaches that the most difficult battle is the one within, according to a Sufi saying, "On God's road, the traveler, the journey, and the path on which he walks are one and the same." Julius Evola. Julius Cesare Evola, born 1898, was an Italian philosopher, occultist and magus, who led a life filled with remarkable and diverse experiences. Ranging from his early days of an artist, being on the edge of suicide, Evola's journey took him from fighting in the First World War to encounters with Tibetan yogi master and even practitioners of Sufism, which were believed to be the last remnants of the Atlantean Magi tradition. Evola's occult scholarship and charismatic presence naturally brought him to the attention of high-ranking political figures of Europe within his time, including Benito Mussolini and leading figures within the SS. Mussolini was reportedly in awe with Evola's magic and knowledge of the occult, both of which were considered unprecedented at the time, earning him the nickname the Magician of Rome. He also founded a magical chain, a lodge called the Ur Group. The name Ur referenced both the Mesopotamian city of Ur and the German prefix Ur, meaning primordial or original. His books can be seen as the most radical and most complete approach to the world of spiritual tradition and occult teachings. Tradition for him was not something like whatever conservatives yap about on X all day. But in sticking as closely to the core of ancient primordial and pre-Christian teachings as possible, making them available and easily understandable for everyone. His most famous works are Revolt Against the Modern World, Ride the Tiger and The Hermetic Tradition. Alongside his many essays on magic, his books present a world of spiritual tradition and understanding that is unprecedented. Free from any bias or cryptic messaging, he always strived to find the spiritual core of fables, artifacts and beliefs, while presenting them in a deconstructed and accessible way. By reading his works, you are more than capable of understanding everything else you come across in the occult world. In recent years, his works have become more popular, since he was the one who brought the lost land of Hyperborea into the public eye, connecting it with Atlantis. Unlike others, he was one of the few linking those lost lands with spiritual traditions and insights, rather than just focusing on their archaeological and historical implications. Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner was an Austrian occultist, philosopher and spiritual teacher, known for his works such as Knowledge of the Higher Worlds, Theosophy and The Calendar of the Soul. He founded the spiritual movement Anthroposophy, which sought to bridge the material and spiritual worlds, offering a path to higher knowledge through inner development and direct experience of the spiritual realm. Steiner's teachings take importance in the cultivation of spiritual perception, the exploration of the nature of the human soul, and the evolution of consciousness. For anyone new in the occult or spirituality, his works are ideal. For anyone new in the occult or spirituality, his works are ideal. If there was ever a school of magic like in Harry Potter, his works would form the basis of the curriculum. Speaking of schools, he is also widely recognized for creating the Waldorf school system, an alternative approach to education that aims to develop each child's unique talents, creativity and inner potential, rather than conforming to the outdated and dogmatic nature in mainstream education, and his schools are still active today worldwide. The Waldorf philosophy views education as a holistic process, nurturing the intellectual, artistic and practical skills of children in a balanced way. And not just that, Steiner had far-reaching expertise and wrote over 330 books on many different fields, ranging from biodynamic farming, alternative medicine and even architecture, all guided by his vision of integrating spiritual awareness in everyday life. Until his very last day, he continued to give readings and lectures, which were remarkably affordable yet rich in insight, making his wisdom accessible to many. He strived to enlighten as many people as possible in order to further humanity, which makes him a figure worthy of veneration and study, as opposed to people like Crowley, which mainstream occultists froth over their mouths still. René Guénon. René Guénon was a French esotericist and occultist. You could think of him as a sort of Indiana Jones, but not in archaeology and hidden artifacts, but more so in hidden and secret knowledge in the tombs of occultism, magic and philosophy. He was a colleague of Evola and they often wrote each other and critiqued each other's work, but all in a good, amicable manner. Although they disagreed on things, they had a very similar view on the world. Guénon came around and joined many different circles, lodges and covens and met many figures in the occult. He studied various and diverse esoteric traditions, Taoism, Hinduism, Gnosticism, before ultimately reaching into Sufism, where he was introduced into its magical practices. This path is what led him to move to Egypt to fully embrace Sufism. And he took on an Arabic name, after having been initiated into an old and traditional Sufism branch, and René Guénon became Abdelwahid Yahya. His most famous occult works are The King of the World, The Multiple States of Being and The Crisis of the Modern World, which is similar to Evola's revolt against the modern world. It is said he wrote this book while he was in a meditative state. Guénon famously uncovered modern Freemasonry to be degenerate and spiritually poor, straying far from the initiatic character it may have had in the early days. Guénon already dismissed Freemasonry as spiritually bankrupt over a century ago. One can only imagine the colorful words he would have for today's brethren. A hallmark of Guénon's work was his precise use of terminology. He insisted on reclaiming words like metaphysics, initiation and mysticism, which he said have been corrupted over time, stripping them of their original power and meaning. To him, language was not just a tool, it was a battleground, and the corruption of key esoteric concepts was one of the greatest threats to true understanding. 1984 and the idea behind Newspeak comes to mind here. Through his studies, Guénon came to the conclusion of perennialism, the belief that all spiritual traditions share a core universal truth. Religions might appear different on the surface, but deep down they all express the same fundamental principles, just in different words and symbols. In other words, all ancient religions are one, not literally, but in the sense that they all hint to different degrees at the same truth. Helena Blavatsky. Helena Blavatsky was a Russian-American occultist and the founder of Theosophy, with its catchy slogan, "There is no religion higher than truth." Her idea and that of her spiritual system is that all religions and folk beliefs share common themes that are all the same at the core, just expressed differently and sometimes even distorted due to political and cultural changes, similar as to perennialism from before. Another thing Theosophy teaches is that there is a brotherhood of spiritual adepts known as masters all around the world, safeguarding and securing the highest spiritual truths and insights, and sometimes influencing certain people to get the current trajectory of spirituality back on track. Theosophy can be seen as an attempt to merge and reconcile every belief system on the world and establish common connections and a thread people can follow, in order to further the progress of humanity before it's too late. Helena was also a diviner and clairvoyant, and through these means she discovered the root race concept, for which she is most famous for, although many others came to similar conclusions independently, thus proving it. This root race concept sees, similar as in Hinduism and other ancient religions and traditions, humanity as going through repeated and predictable cycles, where one civilization emerges, lives in prosperity, stagnates, eventually dies, and the next civilization takes over. It is not understood through conquering, but through natural means. This is just what happens, similar to how a sapling grows into a tree, flourishes, decays, and from the fallen and rotten log springs out a new sapling. According to her, we are currently the 5th root race on this planet, also known as the Aryan race. Note here that Aryan is a Sanskrit term. Arya denotes light and enlightenment. For example, Buddha and his disciples were called Aryans, the enlightened ones. Before us came the 4th root race, the Atlanteans. Before them came the 3rd root race, the Lemurian. Before them came the 2nd root race, the Hyperboreans. Before them, the 1st root race, the Polarian. And before that, well, people came from Mars. But this is a topic for another video. Éliphas Lévi. Eliphas Levi was a French esotericist. He started out as a devout Catholic monk, but thankfully realized that for actual spirituality he had to go somewhere else and abandon the Christian dogma. And he actually became a ceremonial magician of the old branch. He can be seen as the grandfather of modern occult thought. Levi's influence on the Western occult tradition is massive. His works such as The Key of the Mysteries, Histoire de la Magie, Dogma and Ritual of High Magic form the basis of many modern lodges. He was one of the first to take the ancient teachings of Kabbalah, Hermeticism and alchemy and systemize them into a structured, understandable form for Western audiences. He's also the one that famously made the Baphomet illustration, which is not an image of the devil, but of the Hermetic androgyne, also known as Rebis, the result of the great work and the Philosopher's Stone. In the words of Eliphas Levi himself, life is a serpent that constantly creates and devours itself. One must ignore fear and plant one's foot firmly on its head. Hermes, by doubling it, opposes it to itself and in eternal equilibrium makes of it the talisman of the power and the glory of his caduceus. In the next tier, Tier 5, we will look at some hidden secrets and truths many don't know or even want to know, like how the Knights Templar were actually pagan, the tantric discipline of semen retention, and Zunming, the magical ability only true kings receive. You will like, subscribe, join the Discord server, watch to the end and support me on buymeacoffee.com/Daimon.